The marble staircase of the Ashford mansion gleamed under the afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus Ashford had built his tech empire from nothing, and at 33, he owned more than most people could dream of in 10 lifetimes. His San Francisco estate sprawled across 5 acres, with 12 bedrooms, an infinity pool, and a view of the Golden Gate Bridge that real estate agents called priceless. Yet for all his wealth, Marcus had perfected the art of being alone. He worked from his home office most days, preferring the quiet isolation to the bustle of his downtown headquarters. His staff knew to stay invisible, clean when he was out, prepare meals he'd eat in solitude, and never, ever disturb him. That's why the sound piercing through his closed office door that Tuesday afternoon was so jarring. A child's scream. Not the playful shriek of joy, but something raw and terrified. Marcus's fingers froze over his keyboard. In the 3 years since he'd hired Elena Rodriguez as his housekeeper, he'd barely exchanged more than polite nods with the woman. He knew she was 28, a single mother, and desperately in need of the generous salary he paid. He knew she brought her daughter to work sometimes when childcare fell through. But he'd made it clear, keep the child quiet and out of sight. The crying continued, escalating into heartbroken sobs that seemed to echo through the mansion's vast spaces. Marcus pushed back from his desk with an irritated sigh. He had a video conference with Tokyo investors in 20 minutes. Whatever this was needed to be handled quickly. He strode out of his office, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floors, following the sound to the grand foyer. What he found stopped him in his tracks. At the base of the curved marble staircase, a tiny figure in a yellow dress sat crumpled on the floor. The little girl, Sophie, he remembered her name was Sophie, had her small hands pressed against her knee, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. Her dark curls, so like her mother's, were disheveled, and one of her shoes had come off. "Mama," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "Mama, mama, mama." Marcus stood frozen, uncertainty flooding through him. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who made decisions worth millions without blinking, but this tiny, crying child rendered him completely helpless. Where was Elena? Why wasn't she handling this? Sophie's crying intensified, her little body shaking with each sob. That's when Marcus noticed the blood. A thin trickle ran down her shin from a scraped knee, and her elbow was already beginning to bruise. Something shifted inside Marcus's chest, a feeling so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. Without thinking, he found himself kneeling beside the child, his expensive suit pants touching the cold marble floor. "Hey," he said softly, his voice gentler than he'd heard it in years. "Hey, it's okay." Sophie's tear-filled brown eyes turned to him, wide with fear and pain. She hiccuped, her crying momentarily pausing as she looked at this stranger in the suit. Up close, Marcus could see she was so small, so fragile. Her yellow dress had tiny flowers embroidered on it, probably something Elena had made by hand. "You fell down?" Marcus asked, feeling foolish. Of course she'd fallen. That must have hurt. Sophie's bottom lip trembled, and fresh tears spilled over. "Want Mama," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. Where is your Mama?" "Gone," Sophie whimpered. "Mama said stay. But I wanted to see." She pointed up the staircase with a shaking finger. "Pretty windows." Marcus followed her gaze to the stained glass window on the landing, where afternoon light created dancing colors on the walls. The child had climbed the stairs alone, probably mesmerized by the light show, and fallen. His heart clenched at the image of her small body tumbling down those unforgiving marble steps. "Okay," he said, surprising himself with his calm. "Okay, we're going to find your Mama. But first, let's take care of these owies. Can I pick you up?" Sophie looked at him uncertainly, then slowly nodded. Marcus had never held a child before. He'd avoided them at family gatherings, changed seats on airplanes if a baby was crying nearby, and specifically designed his life to be child-free. Yet as he carefully slid his arms under Sophie's small form and lifted her, something profound happened. She weighed almost nothing. Her little arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, and she buried her face against his shoulder, her tears dampening his $500 shirt. Marcus could feel her heart racing, could feel the trembling of her tiny body. And instead of the irritation he expected to feel, there was only an overwhelming need to make her feel safe. "It's all right," he murmured, one hand unconsciously rubbing her back in small circles. "You're okay now. I've got you." He carried her toward the kitchen, where he knew the first aid kit was kept. Sophie's crying had softened to small hiccups and sniffles. As they walked through the mansion, Marcus saw his home through different eyes. Every sharp corner, every hard surface, every potential danger suddenly seemed glaring. This place wasn't built for a child. It was built for show, for impressing business associates and magazine photographers. In the kitchen, Marcus gently set Sophie on the pristine white marble counter. She winced as her scraped knee bent, and he felt that strange sensation in his chest again, as if someone had reached in and squeezed his heart. "Let's see what we have here," he said, retrieving the first aid kit. His hands, so steady when signing multi-million-dollar contracts, shook slightly as he opened it. Sophie watched him with those big brown eyes, still tearful, but no longer screaming. "You're the man in the office," she said quietly. Marcus paused. "You've seen me?" She nodded. "Mama says don't bother the man in the office. Says he's very important and very busy." The words hit him harder than they should have. Important. Busy. Is that all he was? A figure behind a closed door, too important to be bothered by the people who kept his life running? "Well," Marcus said, carefully opening an antiseptic wipe, "right now, taking care of you is the most important thing. This might sting a little bit, okay?" Sophie's eyes widened with fear, and before Marcus could stop himself, he was talking to her in a gentle, soothing voice he didn't know he possessed. "You know what? You're being so brave. I bet you're even braver than the superheroes on TV. Want to know a secret?" She nodded, distracted. "When I was little, I fell downstairs too. And I cried just like you did. But my..." He hesitated, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. "My mom told me that every time we fall and get back up, we get a little bit stronger." As he cleaned Sophie's wounds and applied bandages decorated with cartoon characters, Marcus found himself really looking at this child for the first time. She had her mother's delicate features, but there was something in her eyes, a resilience, perhaps, or maybe just the innocent trust children have before the world teaches them otherwise. "There," he said, smoothing down the last bandage. "All better. You've got your very own superhero bandages now." Sophie looked down at her knee, where a bright pink bandage featuring a flying character now covered her scrape. A small smile, the first Marcus had seen, tugged at her lips. "Pretty," she whispered. That's when they heard the frantic footsteps. Elena burst into the kitchen, her face pale with panic, her cleaning supplies scattered in her wake. "Sophie." She rushed forward, her eyes taking in the scene, her daughter sitting on the counter with bandages, Marcus Ashford kneeling beside her with the first aid kit open. The terror in Elena's eyes was immediately replaced by something worse, fear of losing her job. Elena's hands were shaking as she reached for her daughter. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the instant assessment of how badly this situation could go. In her world, a world he'd never had to inhabit, moments like these could mean the difference between making rent and sleeping in her car. "Mr. Ashford, I'm so sorry," Elena began, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. She lifted Sophie off the counter, inspecting her for injuries, her professional composure crumbling. I was cleaning the guest bathroom upstairs, and I told her to stay in the kitchen. I just needed 5 minutes. I'm so sorry. This will never happen again. Elena, Marcus interrupted gently, standing up from his kneeling position. It's okay. No, it's not okay, Elena said, tears gathering in her own eyes now. I know the rules, Mr. Ashford. I know you don't want to be disturbed, and I promise to keep Sophie quiet and out of your way. I'll make sure she stays in the kitchen from now on, or maybe I can arrange. Elena, Marcus said more firmly, please stop apologizing. But she couldn't stop. 3 years of walking on eggshells, of being invisible, of making sure her presence and her daughter's presence never inconvenienced the man who signed her paychecks. It all came pouring out. I need this job, Mr. Ashford. I know I'm asking too much, bringing her here, but the daycare closed last month and I can't afford the new one, and my mother who usually watches her is sick, and I promise this won't. Elena. Marcus's voice was soft but commanded attention. Your daughter fell down my stairs. She was hurt and scared and crying for you. None of that is your fault. Elena stared at him, disbelief written across her features. Sophie had buried her face in her mother's shoulder, leaving wet tears on Elena's uniform shirt. Marcus could see the way Elena held her daughter, protectively, desperately, as if Sophie was the only thing in the world that mattered. Because he realized she probably was. In the 3 years Elena had worked for him, Marcus had never really seen her. She was a function, someone who kept his house spotless, who prepared meals he barely tasted, who existed in the periphery of his awareness. Looking at her now, really looking at her, he saw someone entirely different. Elena Rodriguez was 28 years old, the same age Marcus had been when he'd sold his first company. But while he'd been celebrating with champagne in penthouses, Elena had been what? Raising a child alone, working multiple jobs probably, fighting to survive in one of the most expensive cities in America. Her uniform was impeccably clean but worn at the edges. Her hands, he noticed, were rough from years of cleaning products and hard work. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. And yet, despite the exhaustion he could see in every line of her body, when she looked at Sophie, her face transformed with a love so fierce it was almost tangible. How did she fall? Elena asked quietly, checking Sophie's bandaged knee and elbow. The stained glass window on the landing, Marcus explained. She wanted to see the colors. Elena closed her eyes briefly, and Marcus could see her imagining it, her daughter climbing those steep stairs alone, losing her balance, falling. The gate, she whispered. I forgot to close the safety gate at the bottom of the stairs. I always close it, but I was rushing and… What safety gate? Marcus asked. Elena's cheeks flushed. I bought one a few months ago. I installed it at the bottom of the stairs when I bring Sophie. I take it down before I leave. I didn't think you'd mind since you never use those stairs anyway, and I didn't want to bother you by asking permission. She'd been protecting her child in his house, Marcus realized, trying to make this adult environment safe for a toddler, all while staying invisible enough that he wouldn't even notice. The thought made him feel small. I should have asked, Elena continued, her voice dropping. I'm sorry, I overstepped. Stop, Marcus said, and this time there was something different in his voice. Not anger, but something Elena couldn't quite identify. Stop apologizing. Stop explaining. Just stop. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that disturbed his usually perfect appearance. For the first time in years, Marcus Ashford looked uncertain. I'm the one who should apologize, he said quietly. Elena's eyes widened. Sir? This house. Marcus looked around the kitchen with its top-of-the-line appliances and cold marble surfaces. It's not safe for a child. The stairs aren't safe. And I never even thought about it because I never thought about anything beyond my own convenience. Sophie had calmed down now, her face still pressed against her mother's shoulder, but her crying reduced to small hiccups. She peeked out at Marcus with those big brown eyes. She could have been seriously hurt, Marcus continued. And it would have been my fault for creating an environment where a mother has to hide the fact that she's a mother just to keep her job. Mr. Ashford, how old is she? Marcus asked suddenly. 3? Yes, sir. 3.5. And where does she usually stay when you're working? Elena hesitated, and Marcus could see her weighing whether honesty would cost her this job she so desperately needed. Finally, she spoke. My mother watches her usually, but she's been having health problems. The daycare we used closed down 3 months ago. The new ones in this area. She paused, choosing her words carefully. They cost more than I make in a month. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. So, she comes here with you. Only once or twice a week, when I have no other choice. I promise, Mr. Ashford, I keep her in the kitchen or in the small room off the mudroom. She has her coloring books and her quiet toys. I've taught her to be so quiet and she's really good about it, but today I think she just got curious about the beautiful window, Marcus finished. Because she's 3 years old, and 3-year-olds are supposed to be curious. He looked at Sophie, who was now watching him with less fear and more interest. She had one small hand tangled in her mother's dark hair, a gesture of comfort and connection. What's your favorite color, Sophie? Marcus asked gently. Sophie pulled her thumb from her mouth long enough to whisper, Yellow. Like your dress, Marcus observed with a small smile. It's very pretty. For the first time, Sophie smiled back, just a little. Elena looked between her daughter and her employer, confusion evident on her face. Elena, Marcus said, his voice taking on a decisive tone that she heard him use on phone calls with his executives. We need to talk about your working conditions. But first, I think Sophie might need some ice cream. Children get ice cream after they're brave about getting hurt, right? Elena blinked. I don't know if she should have sugar right now. I want ice cream, Sophie said quietly, her first words directed at Marcus since he'd bandaged her up. That settles it then, Marcus said, moving toward the massive freezer. He pulled open the door and stared at the contents. Prepared meals from a high-end service, frozen vegetables, but no ice cream. Of course there was no ice cream. Why would there be? He lived alone and never kept anything in his house that might spoil or go bad. The absurdity of it hit him. Here he was, a billionaire with every luxury imaginable, and he couldn't offer a hurt child the simple comfort of ice cream. I don't have any ice cream, he admitted, feeling foolish. That's okay, Mr. Ashford, Elena said quickly. She doesn't need. But I can get some, Marcus continued, already pulling out his phone. What kind do you like, Sophie? Chocolate? Vanilla? Strawberry? Sophie's eyes lit up. Chocolate. Then, remembering her manners, she added, Please. Marcus found himself smiling, actually smiling, as he pulled up a delivery app. Chocolate it is. The good stuff. As he ordered not just ice cream, but several pints of different flavors, along with toppings and even some cookies, Elena watched him with an expression caught somewhere between gratitude and bewilderment. This wasn't the Marcus Ashford she'd worked for. That man never smiled, never engaged, never showed any interest in anything beyond his work. Mr. Ashford, Elena said hesitantly. You really don't have to. I want to, Marcus said, and he realized it was true. He wanted to make this little girl smile. He wanted to ease the fear in Elena's eyes. He wanted, suddenly and urgently, to be a better person than the one who'd hidden behind his office door for 3 years. The ice cream would arrive in 20 minutes. In the meantime, Marcus did something that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He canceled his video conference with Tokyo, sent a brief email saying a family emergency had come up. It wasn't exactly a lie. He was realizing that the family he'd been ignoring was closer than he'd ever imagined. "While we wait," Marcus said, "why don't we make sure Sophie is really okay? Should we call a doctor? I have a physician on retainer who makes house calls." Elena's expression tightened again. "I can't afford." "Elena." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "When someone gets hurt in my house, I take care of it. Please, let me make sure she's okay." The doctor arrived within 30 minutes, just as the ice cream was delivered. Dr. Patricia Chen had been Marcus's personal physician for 2 years and had learned not to be surprised by his calls. But when she walked into the kitchen to find Marcus Ashford sitting at his counter with a small child eating chocolate ice cream on his lap while her mother watched anxiously, even Dr. Chen had to hide her shock. Sophie was examined thoroughly while sitting on Marcus's lap, which somehow had become her preferred spot. She'd climbed up there when the ice cream arrived, and Marcus hadn't had the heart to move her. Her small warm weight against his chest felt strange and comfortable at the same time. "Just some scrapes and bruises," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Nothing serious. Keep those bandages clean and dry, and she'll be good as new in a few days." "You're a very brave girl," she told Sophie. "The man in the office gave me superhero bandages," Sophie announced proudly, holding up her knee for inspection. Dr. Chen glanced at Marcus with barely concealed amusement. "Did he now?" After the doctor left, Marcus found himself reluctant to return to his office, to his work, to his carefully constructed isolation. Sophie had finished her ice cream and was starting to droop against his chest, the trauma of her fall and the subsequent excitement catching up with her. "She needs to nap," Elena said softly, reaching for her daughter. "I can put her in the mudroom on the cushions." "No," Marcus said, the word coming out more forcefully than he intended. "I mean, there must be somewhere more comfortable. A guest room?" Elena looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Ashford, I don't think." "I insist." Marcus stood carefully, Sophie secure in his arms. "Show me where you usually try to get her to rest." Reluctantly, Elena led him to the small mudroom off the kitchen. It was a narrow space lined with storage for cleaning supplies. In one corner, Elena had created a makeshift bed with folded blankets and cushions. Some of Sophie's toys were neatly stacked in a basket. A juice box and crackers sat on a small napkin. This was where his employee had been trying to care for her child. In a storage room. While he sat in his office, in his comfortable chair, in his temperature-controlled environment, never once wondering where they were or what they might need. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Shame. "No," he said quietly. "No, this isn't." "Elena, come with me." Marcus carried Sophie through the mansion, Elena following uncertainly behind. He climbed the main staircase. Now he understood why Elena had installed that safety gate, and turned down the wing opposite his master suite. He stopped in front of a door he hadn't opened in over 2 years. The guest suite had been his sister's room when she visited, back before the falling out, before she told him he'd become someone she didn't recognize. Marcus pushed open the door to reveal a spacious room decorated in soft blues and creams, with a large bed, a sitting area, and windows overlooking the garden. "This room," Marcus said, gently laying Sophie on the bed. She immediately curled into the soft comforter, her eyes already closing. "This room should be used." Elena stood frozen in the doorway. "Mr. Ashford, I can't. She can't stay in your guest room. What if she makes a mess? What if?" "Then we'll clean it," Marcus said simply. He carefully removed Sophie's remaining shoe and pulled a blanket over her small form. She looked impossibly tiny in the large bed, like a doll in a display. Within seconds, exhausted from her ordeal, she was asleep. Marcus gestured Elena out into the hallway, quietly closing the door. They stood in the wide corridor, facing each other. For the first time, Marcus really looked at the woman who'd kept his life running for 3 years. Elena Rodriguez had delicate features that probably turned heads, though she always wore her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. There was a streak of cleaning product on her uniform shirt. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and every line of her body spoke of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. "We need to talk," Marcus said. "Please don't fire me," Elena whispered, the words tumbling out. "Please, Mr. Ashford. I know I violated your rules. I know I've brought personal issues into your home, but I need this job. Sophie needs." "Elena, I'm not firing you." Marcus ran a hand through his hair again. "I'm trying to apologize." She stared at him, uncomprehending. "When I hired you 3 years ago," Marcus continued, "I told you I valued efficiency and invisibility above all else. I didn't want to be bothered. I didn't want to know about your life. I just wanted my house to run smoothly while I worked." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been treating you like a robot, not a person. And I'm sorry." Elena's eyes widened. In 3 years, Marcus Ashford had never apologized to her for anything, never acknowledged her as more than a function. Today, when I found Sophie crying at the bottom of those stairs, Marcus continued, something changed. I saw what I'd created here. An environment so cold, so unwelcoming, that a mother felt she had to hide her child in a storage room. That's not okay. "I knew the rules when I took this job," Elena said quietly. "The rules were wrong." Marcus leaned against the wall, suddenly tired. "I've spent 3 years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at a distance. Work was easier than people. Money was easier than connection. And I convinced myself that was fine. That's what successful people did. But then I held your daughter while she cried, and I realized." He trailed off. "Realized what?" Elena asked softly. "That I've forgotten how to be human," Marcus admitted. "And that you, both of you, deserve better." They stood in silence for a moment. From behind the closed door, they could hear Sophie's soft breathing. "She talks about you sometimes," Elena said suddenly. "Sophie. She calls you the man in the office. She's curious about what you do in there all day. I've tried to explain about business and computers, but at 3, she just thinks you're probably playing video games." Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. "Video games. I wish." "She thinks you must be very lonely," Elena continued, "spending all day by yourself." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of babes, his mother used to say. Sophie, at 3 years old, had seen what Marcus had spent 3 years denying. He was desperately, profoundly lonely. "She's right," Marcus said quietly. "I am lonely. I've been lonely for a very long time." Elena looked at him with something that might have been compassion. Why? It was such a simple question, but Marcus didn't have a simple answer. "Fear, maybe," he finally said. "Every person I let get close either wanted something from me or eventually left. After a while, it seemed easier to just not let anyone close." "So you built this beautiful house and lived in it alone," Elena said. "Seemed safer that way." Was it? Marcus thought about his days, each one bleeding into the next. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Conference calls and stock reports and business acquisitions. Numbers on screens. Emails from people who wanted his money, his influence, his name attached to their projects. But when was the last time someone had asked him how he was feeling? When was the last time he'd laughed? Really laughed? No, he admitted. It wasn't safer. It was just emptier. Elena studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen, really seen, for the first time in years. "Mr. Ashford." "Marcus," he interrupted.
Please.
I think after everything that's happened today, you can call me Marcus. Elena nodded slowly. Marcus. Thank you for taking care of Sophie today, for being kind to her. For, she gestured vaguely at the closed door, for all of this. But I need to know, is this going to last? Tomorrow, will you want us to go back to being invisible? Because if this is just a temporary moment of guilt, I need to prepare Sophie. I can't let her think that this is how things will be, and then, it's not temporary, Marcus said firmly. I can't go back to how things were. I don't want to. What do you want? Elena asked. It was such a simple question, but Marcus realized he'd spent years not asking it of himself. What did he want? More money? He had enough to last 10 lifetimes. More success? His company was valued at over $2 billion. More property, more possessions, more things?
No.
What he wanted was to hear Sophie laugh. What he wanted was to not feel like a stranger in his own home. What he wanted was to remember what it felt like to care about something beyond the next business deal. I want to change, Marcus said. I want to be better. I want you and Sophie to feel safe and welcome here, not like you're intruding. He paused, realizing how much he was revealing. I want to not be lonely anymore. Elena's expression softened. That's honest. I haven't been honest with anyone in a long time, Marcus admitted, including myself. They stood in the hallway, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, creating those patterns of colored light that had so captivated Sophie. Marcus could understand why now. In the midst of all this cold perfection, those dancing colors were the only thing that felt alive. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now, Marcus said, we make some changes. Real ones. He pulled out his phone. First, I'm hiring you a full-time nanny for Sophie. Someone who can watch her either here or at your place, whatever makes more sense. Mr. Marcus, I can't afford a nanny. I'm hiring her, Marcus interrupted. It's a business expense. You work for me, and you can't work effectively if you're worried about your daughter. It's logical. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't know where to start. Second, Marcus continued, that mudroom is getting renovated. Actually, I'm going to have an interior designer come in and create a proper space for Sophie. Maybe in the room next to this guest suite. A playroom. Somewhere safe and comfortable where she can be during the days she's here. Marcus, this is too much. Third, he pressed on, I'm raising your salary. And, before you object, think about it practically. You've been doing your job while also managing childcare and working around impossible restrictions. That deserves compensation. Elena's eyes had filled with tears. I don't understand. This morning you didn't even know my daughter's name. Now I'm trying to fix my mistakes, Marcus said quietly. And I'm trying to figure out how to be the kind of person who doesn't have to be told that people matter more than privacy. A sound from the bedroom caught their attention. Sophie was stirring, calling out softly for her mother. Elena immediately moved toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped her. Elena, wait. There's something else I need to know. He hesitated, then pushed forward. Where's Sophie's father? Elena's face closed off, her expression becoming shuttered. He's not in the picture. By choice. His choice, Elena said flatly. He left when I was 6 months pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. Signed away his rights. Hasn't seen Sophie since she was born. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest, surprising him with its intensity. What kind of man walked away from his own child? That must have been hard, he said quietly. It was the best thing he could have done, Elena replied, her voice fierce. Better to be gone completely than to be there, but not care. Sophie deserves someone who wants her, who chooses her. not someone who sees her as a burden. She moved toward the bedroom door again, but this time Marcus followed. They entered to find Sophie sitting up, rubbing her eyes, looking confused about where she was. "Mama," she said uncertainly. "I'm right here, baby," Elena said, crossing to the bed and sitting beside her daughter. "You fell asleep." Sophie looked around the unfamiliar room, then spotted Marcus. "The man in the office," she said, and there was no fear in her voice now, just recognition. "His name is Marcus," Elena said gently. "Can you say Marcus?" "Marcus," Sophie repeated carefully. Then, with a child's devastating directness, she asked, "Can we stay here? This bed is soft." Marcus found himself kneeling beside the bed, so he was at Sophie's eye level. "Yes," he said. "You can stay here anytime you want." Sophie beamed at him, and Marcus felt that strange sensation in his chest again. Later, he would recognize it as his frozen heart beginning to thaw. "Can we have more ice cream?" Sophie asked hopefully. Elena started to shake her head, but Marcus laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rusty from disuse, but genuine. "Maybe after dinner," he said. "Do you like pizza?" Sophie's eyes went wide. "I love pizza." "Then pizza it is," Marcus declared. He stood up, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Elena, would you and Sophie like to have dinner with me? Not in the kitchen. In the dining room, as my guests." Elena looked uncertain. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Marcus said, and realized it was true. That evening, for the first time since Marcus had moved into the mansion, the formal dining room was used for something other than impressing business associates. Sophie sat on a stack of cushions in one of the ornate chairs, tomato sauce on her face, chattering about her favorite colors and her stuffed animals and whether Marcus thought unicorns were real. And Marcus, who had spent 3 years eating alone, found himself actually enjoying a meal for the first time in recent memory. Section 4. Building Bridges. The morning after Sophie's fall, Marcus woke up early as usual, but instead of heading straight to his office, he found himself walking through the house, seeing it with new eyes. Every corner seemed to hold potential danger for a small child. The sharp edges of his modern furniture, the expensive sculptures that could topple, the unlocked cabinets filled with cleaning supplies. He spent the morning making phone calls. A child-proofing company would arrive that afternoon. An interior designer specializing in family-friendly spaces was scheduled for tomorrow. And a local nanny agency was sending over candidates for interviews. Around 9 o'clock, he heard the sound of the front door opening. Elena always let herself in with her key, arriving early to prepare breakfast before starting her cleaning routine. But this morning, Marcus was waiting in the kitchen. "Good morning," he said when Elena appeared, Sophie's small hand clasped in hers. Elena stopped short, clearly not expecting to see him. "Good morning, Mr. Marcus," she corrected herself. "I didn't think you'd be up yet." "Couldn't sleep," Marcus admitted. "Too much thinking." Sophie peeked out from behind her mother's legs, then smiled when she saw Marcus. "Marcus," she said happily. "Look, my knee feels better." She pointed to the superhero bandage, which was slightly crumpled from a night's sleep, but still firmly in place. "I'm glad," Marcus said, crouching down to her level. "You know what? I was thinking, would you like to help me with something today?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "Help. I need someone to test out a playroom I'm having built. To make sure it has all the right things. Blocks and crayons and maybe a toy kitchen? But I don't know what 3-year-olds like. Do you think you could help me figure that out?" "I can help," Sophie declared enthusiastically. Elena's expression was a mix of gratitude and concern. "Marcus, you really don't have to." "I want to," Marcus said firmly. "Besides, I've already made the calls. The designers are coming tomorrow. I figured Sophie should have some input since it's going to be her space. Over the next few weeks, the Ashford mansion underwent a transformation. The room next to the guest suite, formerly a space filled with furniture Marcus had never used, became Sophie's playroom. It had soft, carpeted floors, walls painted in cheerful colors that Sophie had helped choose, and shelves filled with toys, books, and art supplies. The child-proofing company had made the entire house safer, installing corner guards, cabinet locks, and even padding the marble stairs. Marcus had insisted they do the whole house, not just the areas where Sophie would typically be. She should be able to explore, he'd told the surprised contractors. It's her home too now. The nanny search had been more challenging. Marcus had sat through a dozen interviews, Elena by his side, and they'd rejected candidate after candidate for various reasons. Too strict. Not engaging enough. Didn't seem to genuinely enjoy children. Marcus had never been so picky about hiring anyone, including the executives who ran his companies. Finally, they found Mrs. Patricia Morrison, a warm grandmother of 4 who had decades of childcare experience and a laugh that made Sophie immediately climb into her lap. She was hired on the spot. But the biggest change wasn't in the house. It was in Marcus himself. He found himself restructuring his entire schedule around Sophie's presence. His morning conference calls were moved to later in the day. His afternoon work was done with his office door open, and he'd gotten used to the sound of Sophie's laughter and occasional shrieks of joy floating through the mansion. Some mornings, he'd find Sophie at his office door, clutching a toy and asking if she could work, too. Marcus would set her up with paper and crayons at a small desk he had brought in, and they'd work side by side, him on multi-million-dollar deals, her on masterpieces that he found himself saving in a special drawer. "This is you," Sophie had said one morning, showing him a picture of a stick figure with wild scribbles for hair. "You're smiling." Marcus had looked at the drawing for a long time. "Am I smiling more now?" he'd asked. Sophie had nodded seriously. "You used to look sad through the door window. Now you look happy." The words had stayed with him all day. Through the eyes of a 3-year-old, he'd been transparent. Sad and lonely, locked behind his office door. It was humbling and heartbreaking in equal measure. His relationship with Elena was evolving too, though more slowly. The employer-employee boundary was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Mutual respect. Genuine conversation. Something that felt almost like friendship. They'd fallen into a routine of having dinner together most evenings, Marcus, Elena, and Sophie. What had started as a one-time thing after Sophie's fall had become an unspoken tradition. Elena would cook, though Marcus kept insisting she didn't have to, that they could order in, but she seemed to enjoy it, and they'd sit in the dining room that was finally being used as intended. During these dinners, Marcus was learning things about Elena that shocked him with their unfamiliarity. After 3 years of working for him, he was just now discovering that she'd once dreamed of being a teacher, but pregnancy and bills had derailed those plans. That she'd grown up in a small town in Texas and moved to San Francisco with Sophie's father, only to be abandoned shortly after. That she sent money home to her mother every month, despite barely scraping by herself. "You're a good daughter," Marcus had said when she mentioned this. Elena had shrugged. "She's my mom. She raised me alone too. I know what that's like." "Your father left when I was 2. I don't remember him." She'd glanced at Sophie, who was busy arranging her peas into a pattern on her plate. "History repeating itself, I guess." "It doesn't have to," Marcus had said quietly. "Sophie has you. And you're an incredible mother." Elena had looked startled by the compliment, her cheeks flushing. "I'm doing my best. It shows," Marcus had said, and meant it. He'd been watching Elena with Sophie, the patience, the gentle corrections, the way she made everything a learning opportunity without being overbearing. The way Sophie looked at her mother with absolute trust and adoration. That wasn't something money could buy, or that happened by accident. That was the result of consistent, devoted love. It made Marcus think about his own mother, gone for 5 years now. She'd been a single mother too, working 3 jobs to keep Marcus fed and clothed after his father had died when Marcus was 7. He'd built his empire partly to honor her memory, to prove that her sacrifices hadn't been in vain. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten the lessons she'd tried to teach him. About kindness, about community, about how people mattered more than profit. One evening, about a month after Sophie's fall, Marcus found himself in the playroom watching Elena help Sophie build a tower out of blocks. The way they worked together, heads bent close, Elena's soft encouragement and Sophie's determined concentration, it stirred something in him. "I've been thinking," Marcus said from the doorway. Elena looked up, surprised to see him there.
"About what?"
"About going back to school," Marcus said.
"You."
"For teaching." Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marcus, that's impossible. I can't afford." "I'll pay for it," Marcus interrupted. "Tuition, books, whatever you need." Elena's expression closed off. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. Because I already owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said firmly. "Elena, you've kept my life running for 3 years. You've been professional, discreet, and excellent at your job, all while dealing with circumstances I can't imagine. And now you've done something even more valuable. You've helped me remember how to be human again." "Marcus." "Let me finish," he said gently. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I've been using it to build walls instead of bridges. To isolate myself instead of connect with people. You've shown me what I've been missing. The least I can do is help you achieve your dreams." Elena's eyes had filled with tears. "Why are you doing all of this? The playroom, the nanny, now this? I don't understand." Marcus came into the room and sat down on the floor near them, careful not to disturb Sophie's tower. "Do you know what I did on my 33rd birthday?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "I worked. Straight through. 14 hours. Alone. My sister called and left a voicemail that I never returned. My assistant sent a cake to my house that I threw away. And at the end of the day, I sat in my office and thought, this is success. This is what winning looks like." He paused, looking at Sophie, who had stopped building to listen to the adults talk, even though she probably didn't understand most of it. "But that day Sophie fell," Marcus continued, "when I held her while she cried, when I saw how much you love her, when we ate pizza together and laughed. That was the first time in years I felt like I was actually alive. Like I was participating in life instead of just observing it from behind a desk." "So this is about you," Elena said, but there was no accusation in her voice, just understanding. "Maybe partly," Marcus admitted. "But it's also about doing the right thing. About using what I have to actually help people, instead of just accumulating more. About—" he struggled for the words. "About family." The word hung in the air between them. "We're not your family," Elena said softly. "No," Marcus agreed. "But you're the closest thing I have. And maybe that's enough to start with." Sophie, who had been listening with her typical 3-year-old intensity, suddenly crawled over to Marcus and climbed into his lap. "I like you, Marcus," she announced. "You're nice." Marcus wrapped his arms around her small form, and that feeling in his chest, the one that had started the day of her fall, bloomed into something bigger, warmer. "I like you too, Sophie." That night, after Elena and Sophie had left, Marcus stood in his office, looking at the pictures Sophie had drawn that now decorated one wall. Stick figures with wild hair, lopsided houses, a sun that took up half the page. They were the most valuable things in the room. He picked up his phone and called his sister for the first time in 2 years. "Rachel," he said when she answered, her voice wary. "I think I'm ready to talk." Section 5. The cracks in the foundation. As spring turned to summer, the Ashford mansion had transformed from a sterile showcase into something resembling a home. Sophie's artwork decorated the refrigerator. Her toys occasionally turned up in unexpected places. Marcus had found a stuffed rabbit in his briefcase just yesterday. The sound of her laughter had become as familiar as the chime of his laptop notifications. Marcus's business associates had noticed the change in him. He took fewer meetings, insisted on work-life balance for his employees, and had actually turned down a lucrative acquisition because the company's practices didn't align with his newly examined values. "Who are you, and what have you done with Marcus Ashford?" his CFO had joked. But there was real curiosity behind the humor. Marcus had just smiled. "I'm becoming someone better," he'd said. But not everyone was happy about the changes. It started with comments from his social circle, the other wealthy entrepreneurs and investors he occasionally saw at galas and networking events. Word had spread that Marcus Ashford had essentially adopted his housekeeper's child. The gossip ranged from amused speculation to outright criticism. "It's inappropriate," his former business partner, David Chun, had said over drinks. They'd sold their first startup together, but had drifted apart as Marcus climbed higher. "You're blurring professional boundaries. What happens if you need to fire her? You've created a mess." "I'm not going to fire her," Marcus had said calmly. "But what if you need to? What if she steals from you? Or she won't." "You're being naive, Marcus. This woman and her kid. You don't really know them. They could be taking advantage of you." Marcus had set down his drink, his voice cold. "Elena has more integrity in her little finger than most people I know. And Sophie is 3 years old, David. What exactly do you think she's going to take advantage of?" But the seeds of doubt had been planted, and they found fertile ground in Marcus's insecurities. He'd been burned before, hadn't he? People who claimed to care about him, but really just wanted access to his money, his connections, his influence. The doubts grew stronger when his lawyer called, concerned about liability issues. "If the child gets hurt on your property," the lawyer explained, "even with all your childproofing, there could be complications." "I'm not saying Elena would sue you, but—" "She wouldn't," Marcus interrupted. "You don't know that. People change when money is involved. I think you should have her sign some kind of waiver, just to protect yourself." Marcus had hung up feeling unsettled. Was he being foolish? Was his newfound connection to Elena and Sophie based on genuine care, or was he just a lonely man being manipulated? These thoughts plagued him for days. He found himself watching Elena more carefully, looking for signs of ulterior motives. When she mentioned needing to take Sophie to the dentist, he wondered if she was hinting that he should pay for it. When Sophie hugged him and said she loved him, he questioned whether Elena had coached her to say it. The warmth that had been growing between them began to frost over. Marcus became more distant, more formal. He started taking meals in his office again. He stopped joining Sophie for their afternoon work sessions. Elena noticed immediately. Over dinner one evening, just her and Sophie now, as Marcus had claimed he was too busy, she found herself blinking back tears. For a few beautiful weeks, she'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd found something real here. A kind employer who actually cared. A safe, stable environment for Sophie. Maybe even a friend. But of course it couldn't last. Men like Marcus Ashford didn't really befriend women like her. She should have known better than to let her guard down. The tension came to a head 2 weeks later. Marcus had been auditing his household expenses, something he did quarterly but had neglected lately. Going through the statements, he noticed that Elena had been using his grocery account for more than just his meals. There were purchases of children's snacks, juice boxes, the expensive organic milk Sophie preferred. It wasn't a significant amount of money, maybe a few $100s over several months, but to Marcus's suspicious mind, it looked like exactly what David and his lawyer had warned him about. Taking advantage. Testing boundaries. He called Elena into his office, his voice cold and formal. Sophie was with Mrs. Morrison in the playroom. Thank God. Marcus didn't want her to see this. "Elena, we need to discuss your use of the household accounts. Marcus said without preamble. Elena stood in the doorway, looking confused and worried. Is there a problem? I've noticed charges for items that aren't for my use, Marcus said, keeping his voice level. Children's food, specifically. The color drained from Elena's face. Oh God, I'm sorry. I didn't think you said Sophie was welcome here, and I assumed. You assumed you could help yourself to my accounts without asking? Marcus interrupted, hating how harsh he sounded, but unable to stop himself. The doubt, the suspicion, the fear of being used, it all came pouring out. No, Elena's voice was shaking now. You said she was welcome here. You said to make sure she had everything she needed. I thought that included food when she was here all day. I'm sorry. I should have asked first. I'll pay you back. It's not about the money, Marcus said, but even to his own ears, that sounded hollow. Then what is it about? Elena asked, and now there was anger beneath the hurt. Because a month ago, you were the one insisting on buying her ice cream and pizza. You were the one who built her a playroom and hired her a nanny. Now you're nickel-and-diming me over juice boxes? I'm not, Marcus started, but Elena cut him off. You know what? This is exactly why I didn't want to let my guard down. I knew this was too good to be true. I knew that eventually, you'd remember that I'm just the help, and Sophie's just the inconvenient child who comes with me. That's not fair, Marcus protested. Isn't it? Elena's voice rose. For 3 years, you didn't even know my daughter's name. Then she fell, and you had some kind of crisis of conscience, and you played at being a decent human being for a few weeks. But now what? You've decided we're taking advantage? That we're some kind of threat? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Elena was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. I see it in how you've been looking at me lately. Like I'm trying to trap you or manipulate you. Like Sophie saying she loves you is part of some scheme. Marcus felt his own anger rising. Can you blame me for being careful? I've had people use me before. People who pretended to care, but really just wanted. Wanted what? Your money? Your house? Elena laughed bitterly. Marcus, I've been cleaning your house for 3 years. If I wanted to steal from you, I've had plenty of opportunities. I don't want your money. I just want to be able to feed my daughter lunch while she's here. The statement hung between them, highlighting how absurd Marcus's suspicions had been. He'd accused her of what? Buying her child food? Making sure Sophie could eat while spending long days in his house. Elena, he started, but she was already turning away. I'll write you a check for the groceries, she said, her voice flat. And from now on, I'll bring Sophie's food from home. I won't use your accounts for anything that isn't directly related to your needs. Wait, Elena, I didn't mean... But she was gone, and a moment later, Marcus heard the playroom door close. He sat at his desk, staring at the grocery statements, and felt like the world's biggest fool. What had he done? Elena was right. He'd let his own fears and insecurities poison something good. He'd let the voices of people who didn't matter, David, his lawyer, the gossiping socialites, drown out what he actually knew to be true. Elena had never asked him for anything. Not once. Every improvement he'd made, every expense he'd taken on, had been his idea, his insistence. And the first time she'd made the smallest assumption about what was allowed, he'd jumped down her throat. Marcus put his head in his hands. This was exactly what his sister Rachel had warned him about when they'd reconciled on that phone call weeks ago. Marcus, she'd said, I'm proud of you for opening up your life. But you need to deal with your trust issues. You can't keep one foot out the door, ready to run. If you're going to let people in, you have to actually let them in. All the way. He'd thought he had. But at the first test, he'd reverted to his old patterns. Suspicious. Defensive. Pushing away anyone who got too close. From down the hall, Marcus heard the playroom door open. Small footsteps padded toward his office. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her face troubled. Marcus, she said in her small voice. Why is Mama crying? Marcus felt his heart break. Oh, Sophie, Did you make her sad? Sophie's eyes were accusatory. Mama only cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep. She doesn't cry during the day unless something really bad happens. I made a mistake, Sophie, Marcus said quietly. A big one. Sophie came into the office, climbing into the chair across from his desk, the one he'd had adjusted to her height for their work sessions. You should say sorry, she announced with the straightforward wisdom of a 3-year-old. When I make someone sad, I say sorry. You're absolutely right, Marcus said. I should say sorry. Are you going to? I am, Marcus promised. As soon as I figure out the right words. Sophie considered this. Mama says sorry comes from the heart, not the head. She says if you mean it, the words don't have to be fancy. Marcus looked at this little girl who had somehow, in just a few months, become such an important part of his life, who trusted him, cared about him, despite his many flaws, who was trying to teach him, at 3 years old, how to be a better person. Sophie, he said gently, can I ask you something? Okay. Do you really love me? Or did your mama tell you to say that? Sophie looked confused. Mama didn't tell me to say it. I just do. You're nice to me and Mama. You let me draw pictures in your office. You read me stories before bed sometimes. Why wouldn't I love you? It was such a simple answer. Such a pure one. And it cut through all of Marcus's complicated fears and suspicions like a knife through butter. Why wouldn't she love him? He'd shown her kindness. He'd made her feel safe and welcome. He'd been present in her life in a way her own father had never been. That's all it took for a child. Genuine care, consistently given. It was adults who made love complicated. Adults who attached conditions and looked for hidden motives. Sophie just loved him because he'd been good to her. It was that simple. You're a very smart girl, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. And I love you too. Sophie beamed at him. Then you should go tell Mama you're sorry. And maybe give her a hug. Hugs help. Marcus stood up. You're right. Thank you, Sophie. He found Elena in the kitchen, furiously scrubbing already clean counters, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Mrs. Morrison had tactfully taken Sophie back to the playroom, understanding that the adults needed space. Elena, Marcus said softly. She didn't turn around. I said I'll pay you back. Please don't, Marcus interrupted. Please don't pay me back. Please don't bring food from home. Please don't. He took a breath. Please don't shut me out because I'm an idiot who doesn't deserve your patience, but desperately needs it anyway. Elena's hands stilled on the counter. You were right, Marcus continued. About all of it. I let my fears take over. I started listening to people who don't know you, who don't know us, who can't imagine that genuine kindness exists without ulterior motives. And I hurt you. I hurt you and Sophie, and I'm so sorry. Slowly, Elena turned around. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from crying. Why did you change? She asked. These last 2 weeks, you've been different. Cold. Like the man you were when I first started working here. Fear, Marcus admitted. People started telling me I was being foolish, that you were taking advantage, that I should protect myself. And I have a history of people using me, getting close because of what I could give them, not because of who I am. So I started doubting, started pulling back. And the groceries? Were an excuse, Marcus said. A reason to push you away before you could, he stopped. Before I could what? Elena pressed. Before you could leave on your own, Marcus finished quietly. Everyone leaves eventually, Elena. Everyone I've ever cared about. My father died. My mother died. My sister stopped talking to me. Friends became business contacts. I got used to being alone. It felt safer. But then you and Sophie came into my life, really came into my life, not just existing at the edges of it, and suddenly I cared again. And caring is terrifying. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a happy laugh, but an exhausted, incredulous one. "You think I'm not terrified?" she said. "Marcus, I'm a single mother who cleans houses for a living. My daughter's father abandoned us. I have $73 in my savings account. Every month is a juggling act of which bills I can pay and which ones I can put off. I have no safety net, no backup plan. And then you, a literal billionaire, decide to pay attention to us, and suddenly everything in our lives is unstable in a whole new way." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "I mean that I don't know what this is," Elena said, gesturing between them. "You're my employer, my boss. And yes, we've become something else. Friends, maybe. But I never know where the line is. When you're being kind because you care, or because you feel guilty, or because you're trying to fix something broken in yourself. And that uncertainty is terrifying because if you change your mind, if you decide one day that we're too much trouble or that you want your privacy back, we don't just lose a job. Sophie loses someone she started to think of as family." The last word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "I would never," Marcus started, but Elena cut him off. "You can't promise that," she said. "And I'm not asking you to. I'm just trying to explain why I'm scared too. Why I was actually relieved in a weird way when you started pulling back these last 2 weeks. Because at least then I knew where we stood. At least then the boundaries were clear again." Marcus moved closer, careful not to crowd her. "I don't want clear boundaries anymore," he said. "I want, God, Elena, I don't even know exactly what I want. But I know it includes coming home to find Sophie's toys in my briefcase. It includes dinners where we talk about our days. It includes feeling like this house is actually a home instead of just a building I sleep in." "But what happens when you get scared again?" Elena asked. "When someone else plants doubts or you decide that caring is too hard." "Then I hope you'll call me out on it," Marcus said. "Like you did today. I hope you'll remind me that Sophie loves me because I read her stories, not because I buy her things. I hope you'll—" He paused, gathering courage. "I hope you'll give me the chance to do better." Elena looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her weighing his words, trying to decide if she could trust him. Finally, she spoke. "I need you to understand something," she said. "Sophie is my everything. My whole world. I've spent 3 years keeping her safe, making sure she has what she needs, even when it meant I went without. And I'm not going to let anyone hurt her. Not even you, Marcus, no matter how much money you have or how many kind gestures you make." "I understand," Marcus said. "And I would never want to hurt her. Or you." "But you did hurt us," Elena said. "These last 2 weeks, you did. And I need to know, is that going to happen every time you get scared? Because if it is, if this is going to be a cycle of closeness and distance, warmth and cold, then maybe it's better if we go back to how things were before. Clear boundaries. Professional only. Safe." The thought of going back made Marcus's chest tighten. Back to eating alone, working alone, existing alone. Back to Sophie being kept in the mudroom, her presence something to be hidden rather than celebrated. "No," he said firmly. "I don't want that." "Then what do you want?" Elena asked. It was the second time she'd asked him that question, and this time, Marcus had a clearer answer. "I want to be the person Sophie already thinks I am," he said. "Someone worth loving. Someone consistent and present and real. I want to stop hiding behind my money and my fears. I want—" He looked directly at Elena. "I want us to be a family. A real one. Not employer and employee who sometimes eat dinner together. Not just a billionaire and his housekeeper's kid. A family. Elena's eyes filled with tears again. Marcus. I know I don't have the right to ask for that, Marcus continued. I know I've messed up. I know I'll probably mess up again because I'm still learning how to do this, how to let people in. But I want to try. If you'll let me. For a long moment, Elena didn't speak. Then slowly she nodded. On one condition, she said. Anything, Marcus promised. Stop listening to people who don't know us. Stop letting them tell you what our relationship is or isn't, what we want or don't want. If you have doubts, if you're scared, come talk to me. Actually talk to me. Don't just pull away and make assumptions. That's fair, Marcus said. And I have a condition too. Elena raised an eyebrow. Oh. Stop calling me Mr. Ashford in your head, Marcus said. I can tell you still do sometimes. And stop treating this house like you're just passing through. You live here too, you and Sophie. This is your home as much as it is mine. Elena laughed, a real laugh this time, and wiped her tears.
Deal.
They stood in the kitchen, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and something between them shifted. Not into something different, but into something clearer. More honest. More real. From the playroom, they heard Sophie's voice calling. Is everyone happy now? Can I have a snack? Marcus and Elena looked at each other and laughed. Yes, sweetheart, Elena called back. Everyone's happy now. And for the first time in a long time, it was true. 3 months later, the Ashford mansion buzzed with an unfamiliar energy. Music played from the kitchen, where Elena was teaching Sophie to make cookies. Marcus's sister Rachel was there too, along with her husband and their 2 kids who Sophie had immediately claimed as her best friends despite having just met them that morning. It was Sophie's 4th birthday party, and the house had been transformed. Balloons in yellow, Sophie's favorite color, decorated every room. A rainbow unicorn cake sat on the kitchen counter, slightly lopsided because Sophie had insisted on helping frost it. The playroom had been cleared out for games, and the backyard had been set up with a bouncy castle that Marcus had insisted on despite Elena's protests that it was too much. Too much is kinda my thing, Marcus had said with a grin. Besides, when do I ever get to throw a kid's birthday party? Let me have this. Marcus stood in the doorway now, watching the organized chaos. Rachel's kids were teaching Sophie how to do a complicated handshake. Elena was laughing at something Rachel had said, looking more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen her. Mrs. Morrison was helping set up party games, her warm presence a steadying force. This was what family looked like, Marcus realized. Not the quiet, sterile perfection he'd once valued. But this, noise and laughter and slight disorder and genuine joy. You look happy, a voice said beside him. David Chin stood there, one of the few of Marcus's old friends who'd been invited. Their relationship had been strained since David's comments about Elena, but Marcus was trying to rebuild bridges, to not completely cut off his past even as he moved forward. I am happy, Marcus said simply. David looked around the room, taking in the domestic scene. I owe you an apology, he said finally. What I said a few months ago about Elena taking advantage. I was wrong. Yes, you were, Marcus said, but there was no anger in his voice. But I understand why you said it. I had the same fears. And now I know that some things are worth the risk, Marcus said. He watched Sophie spin in a circle, her yellow birthday dress flaring out, her laughter pure and unrestrained. This is worth the risk. David nodded slowly. She calls you Marcus now. I noticed. Not Mr. Ashford. She calls me a lot of things, Marcus said with a smile. Marcus. Silly Marcus. Marcus who reads the best stories. Yesterday, she introduced me to her stuffed animals as my friend Marcus who lives with us. Lives with us, David repeated. Not who we live with. Marcus caught the distinction. Yeah. To Sophie, this is her home. I just happen to live here too. And that doesn't bother you? Having your space invaded? Marcus thought about it. His house had indeed been invaded. There were crayons on his desk, Cartoons on his TV. Toys in every room. His carefully organized life had been completely disrupted. "It doesn't feel like an invasion," Marcus said. "It feels like waking up. Like I've been sleepwalking through my life for years, and they shook me awake." Before David could respond, Sophie ran over, grabbing Marcus's hand. "Marcus, come play. We're doing the pretzel game." "The pretzel game?" Marcus asked, bemused. "She means Twister," Rachel called from across the room. "Fair warning, big brother, Sophie is ruthless at it." Marcus let himself be pulled into the game. 20 minutes later, he was twisted into an impossible position, Sophie giggling as she somehow balanced perfectly while the adults struggled. "How are you so good at this?" Marcus asked, his left hand on blue, his right foot on red, his body forming a bridge. "I'm small," Sophie said, as if this explained everything. Then she shifted her weight and Marcus lost his balance, collapsing in a heap. Sophie shrieked with laughter and threw herself on top of him. "I win." "You definitely win," Marcus agreed, hugging her close. Over her head, he caught Elena's eye. She was watching them with an expression that made his heart skip. Tender, trusting, maybe even loving. After the party games, they gathered for cake. Marcus had ordered a professional photographer to capture the day, but Rachel had insisted on taking candid shots with her phone too. "The fancy photos are great," she'd said, "but these are the ones you'll actually look at years from now. The real moments." As Sophie blew out her candles, making a wish she whispered was for everyone to be happy forever, Rachel snapped a photo. Later, when Marcus saw it, he'd realize it captured everything that mattered. Sophie's face bright with joy, Elena's hand on her daughter's shoulder, and Marcus leaning in close. All of them together. All of them home. After cake, after presents, after the sugar high kids had finally crashed and Rachel's family had headed to their hotel, Marcus found Elena on the back patio. Sophie was asleep in her room. Not the guest room anymore, but officially her room, with her name on the door and her drawings on the walls. "Successful party?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair beside Elena. "More than successful," Elena said. "Thank you. For all of it. The bouncy castle, the fancy cake, the photographer. It was too much, but it was perfect." "Too much is kind of my thing," Marcus repeated his earlier statement. Elena laughed. "I've noticed." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Sophie's father called last week." Marcus's protective instincts immediately flared. "What did he want?" "He saw a photo someone posted from here," Elena said. Sophie playing in the backyard, with the mansion in the background. And suddenly, after 4 years of silence, he wants to be involved in his daughter's life. Marcus felt anger simmer in his chest. "Did you tell him to get lost?" "I told him that if he wanted any relationship with Sophie, he'd need to go through lawyers and prove consistent interest over time. That he doesn't get to walk back in just because he realized his daughter lives in a nice house now." "Good," Marcus said firmly. "Sophie deserves better than someone who only shows up for the benefits." Elena turned to look at him. "She talks about you constantly, you know. To everyone. Her teachers at preschool, the other kids, my mother on video calls. Marcus this and Marcus that. Last week she told her teacher that you're her chosen family." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Chosen family. She heard it on a TV show, Elena explained. The characters were talking about how family isn't just blood, it's the people you choose to have in your life. And later, she asked me if that was true. If you could choose your family. "What did you tell her?" "I told her yes," Elena said. "I told her that some of the best families are the ones we choose." "And does she?" Marcus hesitated. "Does she choose me?" Elena smiled. "Marcus, she chose you the day you bandaged her knee and bought her ice cream. Every day since, she's been choosing you all over again." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the San Francisco skyline. Finally, Marcus spoke. I talked to my lawyer last week, he said. About my will. Elena stiffened. Marcus. Let me finish, he said gently. I'm changing it. Setting up trusts. For Sophie's education, for your future, for both of you to be secure no matter what happens to me. You don't have to do that, Elena said, but her voice was shaky. I know I don't have to, Marcus said. I want to. You're my family, Elena. You and Sophie. And family takes care of each other. Elena's eyes filled with tears. We take care of each other, she echoed. Not you taking care of us. That goes both ways. I know, Marcus said. You've taken care of me more than you realize. You gave me my life back.
You taught me how to feel again.
You and Sophie. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Elena reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact, and Marcus felt the significance of the gesture. For what it's worth, Elena said quietly, you're the best thing that's happened to us too. Not because of the house or the money or any of that. Because you see us. You see Sophie as a whole person, not just a child to be tolerated. You see me as more than just your employee. You see us. You're easy to see, Marcus said. You're both brilliant and beautiful and so much stronger than you give yourselves credit for. They sat there, hands linked, watching the last light fade from the sky. Somewhere inside, Sophie would be sleeping in her room, surrounded by her new birthday treasures, safe and loved and secure. 6 months ago, Marcus had been a lonely man in an empty mansion, convinced that isolation was the same as independence, that wealth could substitute for warmth. Then a little girl had fallen down his stairs, and everything had changed. Elena, Marcus said suddenly, I need to tell you something. She turned to look at him, and in the twilight, her face was soft and open. I love you, Marcus said. Both of you. As a family. And I know that's complicated, and I know we need to figure out what that means, but I needed you to know. You're not my employee who I'm fond of. You're not a convenience. You're my family, and I love you. Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus started to panic. Had he said too much? Crossed a line they couldn't come back from? Then she squeezed his hand. We love you too, she said simply. We have for a while now. Relief flooded through Marcus. Yeah. Elena smiled. Sophie tells you every night when you read her stories. And I've been too scared to say it, but yes. We love you, Marcus. As a family. So where do we go from here? Marcus asked. Elena considered.
Forward, she said.
We go forward. Together. As a family. Whatever that looks like for us. Together, Marcus echoed. I like the sound of that. They went inside eventually, checking on Sophie, who was sprawled across her bed in typical child fashion, one arm thrown over her head, her new stuffed unicorn clutched in the other. Marcus gently covered her with a blanket, and Elena straightened her pillow. Standing there, looking down at this small person who had changed everything, Marcus felt a peace he'd never experienced before. This was what he'd been missing. This was what money couldn't buy. Genuine connection. Real love. Chosen family. Good night, Sophie, he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Happy birthday. As they closed the door softly behind them, Sophie stirred slightly and mumbled in her sleep. Love you, Marcus. 3 words. So simple. So profound. In the hallway, Elena slipped her arm through Marcus's. Want to watch a movie? Like a real family movie night? With popcorn? Marcus asked. With lots of popcorn, Elena confirmed. They headed downstairs together, and Marcus realized that this ordinary moment of deciding to watch a movie together was extraordinary. Because it was normal. Because it was real. Because he wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Marcus woke early as usual, but instead of heading straight to his office, he found himself drawn to the kitchen. Elena was already there, making coffee, and Sophie was at the counter with her coloring books. "Morning, Marcus," Sophie chirped.
"Look."
"I'm drawing us." Marcus came to look at the picture. There were 4 stick figures, clearly Sophie, Elena, him, and what appeared to be Sophie's stuffed unicorn, standing in front of a lopsided house. They'd all gotten what they needed, and in the process, they'd become what each of them had been missing, a complete family. "Group hug," Sophie announced, running into the kitchen and wrapping herself around both of their legs. Marcus and Elena laughed and bent down, scooping Sophie up between them, the 3 of them wrapped in an embrace that felt like home. "I love our family," Sophie declared. "Me too," Elena said. "Me 3, Marcus added, and they all laughed at the silly joke. As the year continued to unfold, as they built more memories and navigated more challenges and celebrated more milestones, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that this was his greatest success. Not the billions in the bank, not the company he'd built, not any of the accolades he'd accumulated.
This. Love.
Family. Home. A billionaire had found his maid's toddler weeping alone after falling from stairs, and what he did next shocked everyone. He became a father, opened his heart, and discovered that the wealth he'd been seeking all along had nothing to do with money. He'd found his true fortune, and it was worth more than all the billions in the world. The end.